Yes.
And that showed early in the project that a significant part of the reserves constituted two kinds of coal, right?
Yes.
And one was steam coal suitable for burning in a power plant, right?
That's correct.
And the other was metallurgical coal suitable for use in steel making, right?
That's correct.
And the board was informed this at an early stage in the project, right?
I can't recall exactly when the board was informed of that, and I don't know how early. But yes, at one point we knew about it. Yes.
What's your best approximation of when you believe you were told that?
Let me have a quick look. I would say 2011, maybe? Early 2011?
The fact is that this was known to you well before 2011, right?
No. No, I don't believe so, but I can't be sure.
And you knew it because not only were you a board member, but your hand-picked representatives were on site as early as 2007, right?
They were on site, yes. I am not saying that this means that I knew about the metallurgical coal at that time. I don't believe it was that early.
You also knew, didn't you, that metallurgical coal could be profitably exported to Asian steelmakers, right?
I know that now.
Truth is, you knew that very early on into the process of the Taisheko project, right?
No, that's not the truth.
The truth is, you knew very early on that those sales of metallurgical coal would yield significant higher revenue for Fremont than sales to Juris Electrical Company, right?
This is something that was much better known by Framingham than it was ever by me.
And you knew just as much as Framingham did because you were sitting on the board of directors and jointly controlling the project, right?
That's not right.
The sales to Asian markets began in early 2010, didn't they?
I don't know that.
The fact of the sales were known to you because you were a director of the company, and this was a matter reported to the board in early 2010, right?
I don't know that.
And you were told about them in 2011 as well, weren't you?
In 2011, I became aware of it, but as I said, I don't think I was aware of it before that.
You had your hand-picked member of the Montero management team on site as the CEO of Fremont from early 2011, right?
Yes, but the business of the company was not to sell metallurgical coal, never was. That came up later, much later, and I was not aware of it. It was an initiative, shall we say, of Framingham.
Excuse me, the fact is that there is a road connecting the mine to the open sea, right? In this country you call Lauritania, right?
It's Lorania, and I don't call it that. That's its name.
The truth is there is a road connecting the premises to the ports of that country, right?
Correct.
And the truth is that the CEO of Fremont was always well aware that trucks were leaving the plant laden with metallurgical coal bound for the lucrative Asian markets, right?
You're probably right, because in those days, in that relevant time, the CEO of Fremont was a Framingham person, and yes, they would clearly have known.
Excuse me, the CEO of Fremont during the entirety of 2011 and the first half of 2012 was your hand-picked representative, Miss Daisy, right?
Yes, but if you're telling me that this has been going on since 2010, then that was not my hand-picked representative when things started.
But Daisy told you, didn't she, about the progress that had been made in exporting to the Asian markets, right? She knew about it.
In 2011, as I have testified now repeatedly, I became aware that this was going on and obviously spoke about it with my opposite number at Framingham, but you were talking about earlier, and earlier was his person, the CEO of Fremont, not Daisy.
The truth, Ms. Montero, is that you are a hands-on manager. Isn't that the truth?
I am not a control freak, if that's what you're implying.
The truth is you're a micromanager, isn't it?
I would not
Withdrawn. The truth is that at all times throughout Fremont's existence, you jointly controlled Fremont, isn't it?
I jointly controlled Fremont with Framingham, yes.
You had joint managerial control of Fremont, true?
I was not the CEO, so in that sense, my involvement was much more higher level.
Montero, the company of which you're the CEO, jointly controlled Fremont from 2005 onwards, true?
Framingham, yes.
On a 50-50 joint venture, true?
Correct.
Ms. Montero, you're attending the Harvard 20-year class reunion this year, aren't you, for your LLM class?
Yes.
And last year, 2014, you were asked to give a summation of your career to date, weren't you?
Yes.
And could the witness be shown the document on the record, excerpt from contribution by Sandra Montero to 20th reunion book of Harvard Law School class of 1995, published in 2014 in anticipation of reunion of May 2015. Have you got that in front of you, Ms. Montero?
Yes.
To read from that, since receiving my master's degree, I have lived and worked in my home country of Juristania in my family's company, the Montero Company, of which I have been the chief executive officer for many years. My proudest achievement in my career thus far has been the organization and management of the largest infrastructure project my country has ever seen, the Taishoko project. Under my supervision and control, a competitive bid was won, financing was obtained, a coal mine and transmission lines were built, and profitable sales of coal and power were arranged. I am happy to say my company was ably assisted by a well-known Boston-based company, Framingham Industries. Ms. Montero, did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Now, there came a time in July 2012 when the electricity company JCEC began to slow and reduce its contractual payments to Fremont, right?
Yes.
And JCEC claimed that it was doing this because it wasn't getting sufficient revenue from power users, right?
That's what it claimed.
And at that point, Fremont began losing money, right?
Yes.
And from that point, July 2012, the sales to Asian markets became even more vital, didn't they?
Vital to what?
To the survival of Fremont as a business.
It would have been helpful to see the money back, that's for sure.
Sales to Asian markets
Yes.
became because they were more profitable than any other sales, became even more vital once the electricity company started cutting its payments, right?
They would have been helpful had we seen the proceeds of those sales, yes. But we did not.
So, only a few months later, in the fall of 2012, the export of coal to Asia by the Taishoko project became a political hot-button issue, didn't it?
Yes.
And there came a time in 2012, didn't there, when you visited Mr. Bettoni in Boston, right?
Yes.
And you were asked by Mr. Bettoni whether you thought there was any legal issue with the Asian export sales of metallurgical coal, right?
That's what he asked.
Now, if you could turn to paragraph 17 of your witness statement. You say there, and I'm reading it, you told him it was not wholly clear that all the coal taken from the plant had to be used for no other purpose than in the power plant. That's your testimony of what you told him, right?
Yes.
The contract as signed in 2005 had not been amended at any time between then and 2012, right?
Not that clause, no.
No. The political situation had changed, though, hadn't it?
It had.
Okay. And in paragraph 17, you say that at the same meeting, you suggested negotiating with government agencies, in particular the Council on Foreign Trade, to obtain consent to past and future sales of metallurgical coal from the mine. I read that correctly, right?
Yes.
And you've said publicly that you did not engage in any illegal or corrupt conduct to obtain that consent, right?
Yes.
You ended up getting a clearance for the sale of metallurgical coal from the council, right?
I did.
No one at Framingham were involved in the application you made to the Council on Foreign Trade, were they?
They were involved in the sense that they knew what I was doing. But I took care of contacting the council and getting the application, yes.
No one at Framingham were a party to the discussions you had with the Council on Foreign Trade. That was you and the representative of the council, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, you've already testified as to what you consider that the contract meant. Remember, we discussed paragraph 10 of your witness statement and your view that nothing in the contract imposed an obligation of exclusivity towards the power company, right?
That was my understanding of what Section 4 says.
And that is today your understanding of what Section 4 says. You've already testified that, right?
That is exactly what I said, yes.
So the fact is that if one assumes that that is correct, then getting the council's permission on whatever basis, retrospective or prospective, was completely unnecessary, wasn't it?
No, it was not.
The fact is that if there was no obligation of exclusivity, then it was not necessary to receive any further government permission to engage in sales to other buyers, right?
That was my interpretation. Perhaps others might have another interpretation, given the language of the contract and the fact that that question is not addressed in the contract.
Well, if Fremont wasn't clearly entitled to make the export sales, this was a matter that it would have been better to address in 2005 when Fremont was negotiating the contract, right?
It's always easy to decide what's better in hindsight, Mr. Nelson.
Well, you negotiated the 2005 contract with the government, didn't you?
Yes.
And you were in charge within the joint venture of strategic planning, right?
Yes.
And you were in charge of government relations too, right?
Yes.
So you would have agree that if there is any doubt over whether exclusivity is a part of the relationship or not, then it would have been far better for you to have negotiated clearer language in the contract, right?
No. It made absolutely no sense at the time. We had no idea that coal was there. We did not know what we were going to find. We were hoping to find coal to burn, but certainly not metallurgical coal. That was not the business of Fremont. So it would have made no sense at all to approach it at that time.
You're aware, aren't you, that the terms of the concession contract make no distinction in terms of the kind of coal in the ground. The terms of the contract give Fremont a clear right over any coal in situ, metallurgical or steam, right?
Yes.
Okay. And whether the coal is metallurgical or steam coal, the potential always existed for surplus coal to be sold to other markets, didn't it?
That's my understanding.
Okay. And from a strategic planning perspective, the ability to engage in those sales was always a critical factor of the business of Fremont, right?
That rather depended on our revenues from the steam coal, yes, and the electricity rather, yes.
It depended on the revenues from the coal in situ, steam or metallurgical, right?
Again, in early days, we had not, the strategic planning, as you call it, did not factor in the sale of metallurgical coal that we did not know was there.
My question is different. You've testified that you understood that the coal, regardless of its composition, in the mine, on your understanding, could be sold to buyers other than the government electricity company, right?
Yes.
If there was any risk of that not being true, you never told the board about it in 2005, right?
I didn't understand. What do you mean, the risk of it not being true?
If there was any risk that the company Fremont would be bound exclusively to sell coal to the electricity company, that is not something you mentioned to the board in 2005, right?
There's no such risk in my view.
And that's what you expressed to the board, right?
I don't remember that we discussed it specifically. The understanding was that we had a right to all the coal, and that was that.
The fact is, the first time you ever mentioned the possibility of such a risk was in October 2012, right?
That would be about right, yes.
Could I go to paragraph 14 of your witness statement, please? Can I ask you about the following paragraph? In paragraph 14, you say nationwide elections took place in November 2012 and the results were a shock to me and my friends in the Direco party. We had expected that our party would remain in office for another 6 years. The fact is that by October 2012, 1 month earlier, you were very apprehensive that the government was about to lose office, right?
I was not happy at the fact that the Retro Party was not on sure ground, that's for sure.
If a political party in government is not on sure ground a month ahead of the general election, then that is reason for apprehension that it is about to lose office, right?
Yes.
So you apprehended in October 2012 that the government would lose the election, right?
It looked that way.
And you continued to be nervous about that prospect on the day of the election, right?
I suppose so.
The truth is that in the interpretation of this contract, nothing changed from a legal perspective. The politics, however, did change in October 2012, right?
The politics did change, yes.
And when you went to obtain the so-called consent from the Council on Foreign Trade, you were not concerned with the legal position as much as obtaining a politically convenient document, right?
I needed political backup for what we needed to do, definitely.
No further questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nelson. In the interest of time, we're going to adjourn the re-examination. But before we do so, unusually, I'm just going to ask my colleagues if they've got any questions. Do you have anything to ask?
Oh, do you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Ms. Montero, do you have an estimate of the volume of the coal that was exported on a quarterly or an annual basis for the met coal?
I'm sure I can find that in my papers if you will give me 10 minutes.
I'm
at
just curious
recess.
as to the number of trucks that it would have taken to do this, to roll all that coal down the road.
You
Do
mean
have any
the one
or-
the coal that was being
Yes,
exported?
the metallurgical coal. I'm just looking for some kind of
Train
ballpark idea of how much coal was
I mean,
on the road.
I know now, I did not know then. I know now that we would have needed, yes, several tens of trucks to, at the time, maybe, I don't know, 20, 25 trucks at the time. I know now, I did not know in those days.
Several trucks per day?
Several trucks per day, yes, for a
Okay.
period of a week, let's
I
say.
understand, thank you.
Do you have a question?
I do. Ms. Montero, I was a little confused about your testimony at the conclusion of Mr. Nelson's questioning, and maybe it's a matter of my misreading of your witness statement, but as I heard your testimony, you were saying that the derecho party lost in November 2012 and that you expected that risk of that they would lose the election, and so you were concerned about that in framing your position with respect to the contract and whether it allowed exports in October 2012. Did I understand what you just testified?
Yes, that's correct.
But your witness statement, paragraph 14, says nationwide elections took place in November 2012, and the results were a shock to me and my friends in the derecho party. So can you square those two pieces of testimony up?
I have to say, I mean, although it did look like the derecho party was going steadily downhill, I retained, probably foolishly, an expectation and a hope that they would find a way to remain in power. But as it turned out, and as we now know, public opinion was strongly against them, and so they lost.
So you meant shocked emotionally rather than intellectually?
I think both.
Ms. Montero, I've just got one question. You mentioned in your evidence that you'd undertaken previous projects Montero had with Framlington.
Yes.
Did any of those involve government concessions?
No.
Thank you very much. Well, I think that brings to the close the cross-examination. I'll go out of mode now. Cross-examination. I expect Larry's going to tell us what happens next.
We'll take a half-hour break, but I would ask the tribunal to get together with some comments before you lose the impression that's been made by this as to...
I thought we were doing comments at the end.
Yes, but I'm suggesting you do, you
Talk about
confer
it. Yes,
now.
yeah, I'm sorry.
You
yes.
don't have to disclose what your comments are, but I think that if we wait until the end, it might be, might not be as good. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll have another...
Should we do it now? I'm going to make an important call. So do it now.
We decided, Helen and I said, we set this up to make some outrageous objections. She set me right up. Very nice, very nice. Very nice.
You can't make bricks without straw.
Our grandpa says, you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs, right?
Oh, no.